Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Lance, we're going to talk about the Ohio State-Tennessee matchup on this show, and then we're going to do our third draft of the top 22 Buckeyes. We did it in the preseason. We did it in the middle of the year, and we're going to do it now based on where guys are as we head into this playoff for the Ohio State Buckeyes, right? So we're going to talk about that. Like, I guess we won't draft Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin because they're hurt.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think maybe in the middle we did draft Josh Simmons after he was hurt, but I think it makes more sense to do it with guys so we know we're going to be playing for Ohio State in the postseason.
Yeah, I think that's because this is really for something. This is like the 22 guys that you would rely on the most, that fans would feel the best about it. Like, that guy, he's going to do so. So if you're hurt, we acknowledge that you're a very good player, but we won't draft you for this. So, but let's start though. You and I we did this on Kings of the North on Sunday. We had a reaction show as soon as the bracket was announced, and now we've done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday Kings of the North shows. But you and I have not talked here on the podcast feed on Kings of Columbus about this Ohio State Tennessee matchup. So you and I need to do that, right? Like we just want to shoot the breeze a little bit, right?
Shoot the breeze, yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. What do you think of Tennessee? Because I have an initial instinct of they're not Georgia, they're not Bama, and part of what I rail against all the time is not everybody in the SEC is Nick Saban Bama or monster defense Georgia. Like, you don't get to absorb that greatness just because you're in the same conference. That's not how it works. And Tennessee is like a prime example of that to me. Like, honestly, like, God, come on. Like, what are you? Wait, you scared of Tennessee? You scared of a team that beat Arkansas that I thought might lose to Vanderbilt in the last week of the regular season? Are you scared? What? Come on. But then actually, I think that underrates Tennessee. So I have to check myself on some of that thinking.
I think maybe of like all of the SEC quote unquote powers this year who have been talked about ad nauseum, it does seem like Tennessee is the one that was talked about like most appropriately or most realistically. And I think maybe it's because Tennessee played Oklahoma pretty early on in the year, and it was evident that like the offense just had a lot to work through. So then everyone, I think, kind of got the proper view on what Tennessee was, which is a team with an offensive head coach and Josh Heupel, who you would assume might have a lot of offensive firepower that isn't quite that, or probably a few degrees short of that this year, but does have a very good defense, does have an incredible defensive line, is, I think, for a lot of people, surprisingly a defense-first team. And I don't know that Tennessee ever kind of got pumped up to be something more than it is. I think Tennessee is good. I think there are definitely matchups in this game that would favor Tennessee, or at least you think they would on paper going into the game, that makes it a compelling pairing in the playoff. But yeah, I don't, they're a flawed team like every team in the country has warts, and certainly the top teams in the SEC did. But a team that will present, I think, some unique challenges to Ohio State, given the current state that Ohio State's in.
Can you do the most of the ball talking? Because that's what probably people want anyway, and I'm just not all the way there. So, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I haven't done like a much of a deep dive on Tennessee. I can talk about them sort of generally.
Yeah. So let me do this. So I'm just looking at the guys who were named to the All SEC team. Just as like a little gauge of like the best Tennessee guys. We may as well start with the running back, right? So Dylan Sampson we did this trivia question on KOTN, one of 6 of the backs in the playoff with 1,000 rushing yards this season. Is it possible, like based on production this year so far, is he the third best running back? Like, could you make a case he's the third best running back in the playoff behind Ashton and Cam Scatterbo?
Yeah, I think you could. Yeah, it's hard, right? Because like, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are very talented. They don't have the same workload that a lot of these other guys have. So
right.
So I don't think they'd be part of that conversation necessarily. They're talented, but we're talking production. Yeah, I think you could put them up there, like Scatterbo, Genty, Caleb Johnson, Dylan Sampson.
But playoff, but like the guys left, right? Like,
yeah. Then I think so.
Yeah. Like, what do you know about him? Is he a big tough guy, little squirmy guy? I don't know. I'm not watching Tennessee during the year. I'm not going to apologize for it.
He's 8th in the country in yards after contact, 927. Averages 3.62 per rush, which is pretty good on a guy that has 256 carries. He is where is he? 6th in the country in missed tackles forced. So he'll run through you, breakaway yards, which is I think yards after you get 15 yards down the field or something like that. I think it's how PFF categorize it. It's 30%, which is like, it's good. I don't know that it's like elite level, but that's still pretty good for a guy with that kind of volume. So I think he's more of a kind of run through you guy than he is run by you guy. I think just based off the statistical profile. I haven't watched Tennessee a ton, but you worry about how difficult guys are to get on the ground, and he seems pretty difficult to get on the ground.
So listen, we're going to give you a deeper, full preview of this game, both on Kings of Columbus and Kings of the North next week. We have time. Caleb Johnson from Iowa is listed at 225. Who are the best backs that Ohio State's faced this year? Caleb Johnson and Jordan James, and I guess Nick Singleton and Katron Allen at Penn State. Yeah, those are the guys who stand out. So Caleb Johnson's listed at 225. Dylan Sampson's listed at 201. 5'11", 201. This is like a little meatball, little bowling ball guy.
It's like an average running back build. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not some giant, not some giant dude. Do you think it's an issue? And what have you thought of Ohio State's run defense this year? Do you think, Ohio State's in trouble, this team's going to come in and run the ball? Or you think Ohio State can handle this?
It'll depend on what Tennessee brings from a passing perspective. If Ohio State only has to worry about Tennessee running the ball, or predominantly worry about Tennessee running the ball, then I think it's okay. And this is true of every defense, is when you have to defend the entire field. And Tennessee makes you do they really spread you out. They'll put the receivers outside the numbers, and I think make it difficult for you to kind of load the box against the run. So that'll be a challenge for Jim Knowles in this defense. I think the one thing that I thought about almost immediately when I saw the matchup, more so than whether or not Ohio State can defend the run or what you might get out of Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava, is the tempo that Tennessee plays with. Because when Ohio State played Oregon, there were just too many snaps in that game where Ohio State was just struggling to get lined up, and the ball was being snapped while defensive linemen had their knee on the ground, or linebackers were looking toward the sideline. And Oregon is not a team that plays super, super fast. They just kind of turned up their tempo a little bit in that particular game. Tennessee has the 11th most plays in the country. So, and Josh Heupel wants to play fast, just sort of comes with the offense. So that'll be a challenge, I think, for Ohio State, which has streamlined its communication defensively and done a nice job of, I think, not overcomplicating things and making sure they are set, but they also haven't played a team that's going to play this fast. Tennessee is 21st in the country running a play every 24 seconds. So that's pretty up there, obviously nationally, but I don't think there's anybody ahead of Tennessee that Ohio State has played this year. So that'll be a challenge as well.
Okay. This was, when they jumped on the scene a couple years ago, they were kind of chucking it all over the place, and they're not that anymore, right? Weren't people all mad a couple years ago? Didn't Jalen Hyatt win the Biletnikoff or something ahead of an Ohio State guy, and people were all ticked off about that?
Yeah, there was a volume thing. Josh Heupel, his background is in the air raid. He was an air raid. He played as an air raid quarterback, and then runs the air raid system as a head coach at Central Florida and now at Tennessee. So he got to Tennessee in 2021. Tennessee's rush rate that year was still pretty high. They ran it 57% of the time in 2021. A little lower in 2022. See what they are this year. Tennessee this season, percentage of times they run the ball, 11th in the country at 60%, north of 60% of the time. So it is a little bit of a different offensive profile. Yeah.
And I don't think there's anybody. So we're talking about, you got to respect Sampson, but I don't think there's anybody in the passing game that scares you the way a couple years ago, if that's what's in people's minds, Oh no, here comes Tennessee. I guess this Dante Thornton doesn't have a lot of catches, but he's a huge big play guy. That's pretty weird. He had 3 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns against Vanderbilt. He has 25 catches this season, but he averages 26 yards per catch.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's always going to have big play ability with their receivers. Squirrel Wright, is a good receiver. Brew McCoy has like some size you got to deal with. So like there are definitely weapons on the outside. There's speed on the outside. Like I think from an athletic profile, this will be, I think, similar to Oregon. In terms of what Ohio State's defense is going to see. But
they don't have a Tez Johnson. They don't have a Tez Johnson.
I don't think they have like the equivalent of Tez Johnson. I think that there is speed at a lot of positions that Ohio State is going to have Big Ten with, which you don't experience in the Big Ten, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that is exactly Oregon, because and like even it's the quarterback conversation. It's not even Tez Johnson. Right. They have a Tez Johnson. They have a young quarterback in Nico Imaliava who has been, I think, up and down this year, and maybe has gotten a little better throughout the year. The couple of times I've checked in on Tennessee, I feel like I've seen times where Nico throws amazing balls and his receivers drop them, and then when they're wide open, he misses them. So there's just some inconsistency there with their passing game, which I don't know how reliable that's going to be. At night in the cold, who knows what other kind of weather you might get if you have to go silent count, if the crowd's really into it. Like, there could be an opportunity there to rattle a still very young quarterback.
Yeah, and I think I saw him most like in the Alabama game, when I felt like Tennessee and Alabama in that game were just missing guys all day. And he only completed barely over half his passes in that win over Alabama. He was 14 of 27 for 194 yards. He also gets sacked a decent amount. Feels like he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games this year where he was sacked at least 3 times. So is this a little bit of like a hold the ball a little bit to make a play kind of young quarterback, which again, I kind of like sometimes, like if you believe in yourself. But now it's a conversation about, can Ohio State get to the quarterback?
I don't know, because Tennessee's offense is not super sophisticated. It's like half field reads, and for the quarterback, it's fairly quarterback friendly. So I don't know why he'd be holding the ball for a long time trying to read stuff out when that's not really what he's asked to do in the offense. I don't know if that's just like a young guy who doesn't know when to cut his losses necessarily, but it's not like Tennessee's not dropping back and doing full field progressions in its passing game.
Okay. He runs for like 25 yards a game. Not a huge run threat, but I think he can move around a little bit. And again, so they lost to Arkansas and they lost to Georgia. Were their 2 losses this year. They beat Alabama, and that's kind of it. They beat Oklahoma. Like Tennessee, Oklahoma in September was a big deal at the time. And then it turned out that Oklahoma stinks. And I think they benched their quarterback in the middle of that game. And that was the beginning of the unraveling of Oklahoma. They beat North Carolina State early in the year in week 2, when that was a ranked win. And then North Carolina State turned out to be lousy. They got taken to overtime by Florida, right as Florida was just beginning to turn from a horrible team to a competitive team. So what they have a lot of I'm not so impressed with what they actually did in the game necessarily, but you got to look at talent here. And so they can run. Dylan Sampson's going to be a guy that they're going to have to tackle. But this is Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs come up and make plays. They're just going to have to tackle a good running back.
Yeah. And your defensive line is going to have to eat up blocks. And then when you get into passing situations, Ohio State needs to do what it did in the 4 games prior to the Michigan game, which is get pretty creative with its blitzes and get pressure and actually hit the quarterback. It didn't do that against Michigan. Davis Warren wasn't sacked in that game. So, and that was, it's not the same thing because the offenses are different, but it was too reminiscent of the Oregon game where the quarterback was just far too comfortable. And Nico Imaliava and these weapons at Tennessee, I think are somewhere in between the capabilities, or not somewhere. I don't think they are somewhere in between the capabilities of Michigan and Oregon and their ability to make it hurt if you don't hit the quarterback.
Yeah. Okay. And then defensively, again, this is an offense. I had mentioned this on another show that by the Brian Fremeau ratings, which we like, which are a drive-by-drive way of measuring teams, the two units, both sides of the ball, offense and defense, the 24 units in the playoff, the Tennessee offense is the worst rated unit of the entire playoff. They're the 35th best offense, but they are the 4th rated defense, and they'll get after you, right? Is this back to this is not unlike anything you would have thought about with Oregon, with their edge guys, anything you would have thought about with Abdul Carter at Penn State. Actually, they're right on top of each other. James Pierce Jr. for Tennessee, according to PFF, has 52 pressures this year. That's 6th among power conference teams. Abdul Carter is 7th with 51. Abdul Carter is probably a pretty good Big Ten equivalent for what James Pierce Jr. is going to bring to the table, right?
Yeah, but James Pierce has had a little bit more production, at least as a pass rusher, than Abdul Carter has. And the other thing with Tennessee is like there's 7 defensive linemen that have played 200 plus snaps, and like all of them have played in every game. So it's a typical kind of deep and fast and athletic SEC defensive line.
So what do you think that means for Josh Fryer and Donovan Jackson? Should Ohio State fans have belief, or should they be panicked that James Pierce is going to blow up this game?
I guess I wouldn't fault you for being panicked. I like this is what it's all about. It's can Ohio State block Tennessee's defensive line, and that becomes a whole different conversation when you're talking about Ohio State potentially shuffling up its offensive line. The one thing that Ryan Day said when we talked to him on Sunday that gave me at least a little more comfort than I had the week before on Wednesday when he initially broached the idea of shuffling the offensive line is that Donovan Jackson's probably not going to move from tackle. Seem pretty set on keeping him at tackle. So now you're just talking about maybe a new center and like reconfiguring the guard positions, or maybe it's just like one new guy in there for Tigger Shabola. I don't know what that's going to look like. Josh Padilla and Luke Montgomery were the 2 names that were mentioned. If it's Padilla, it would obviously be putting him at center. If it's Montgomery, maybe you can just slot him in at right guard and keep everything else the same. So we'll see what shakes out there for Ohio State. But yeah, I don't feel great about the matchup, right? I think Josh Fryer has yet to show me anything to tell me that he can handle speed very well. And Donovan Jackson against Abdul Carter, the couple of times where it was pure pass set and passing situations, Abdul Carter won and sacked Will Howard twice. And we saw what happened when Ohio State tried to run the ball in the interior against Michigan. So I think this is going to be a scheme around it situation for Chip Kelly, which obviously Ohio State did not do a good enough job, or didn't really even appear to try to do that against Michigan. And I don't think they can make that same mistake twice.
So what is your general belief in a situation like that? If you have a great edge rusher, right, and you're not sure of your ability to block him, can you scheme around that effectively? Can you throw quick stuff and do screens and keep 2 tight ends in the game and always have a double team on him? Like, do you think that? I don't think it's unreasonable to be at the point of like, okay, can Ohio State's tackles handle James Pierce Jr.? The answer is no. But can Ohio State's plan handle James Pierce Jr.? How much can that answer be? Yes.
I don't think you can fully negate his impact, but you can do all of the above. I think screens are a big part of it. Ohio State's not been a big screen team. I thought it was somewhat instructive anyway that they tried 2 against Indiana, both got called back for blocks in the back. They tried 1 against Michigan, which I think was one of its more successful passing plays of the day. I think it was a tight end screen on that one. So there's more there. We've not really seen the running backs get involved in the passing game at all, aside from checkdowns. So there's plenty more with that. Maybe you get creative by putting guys like Emeka Ibuka and Brandon Inniss in the backfield and running some concepts with them, whether those are run plays to the edge or getting them out as pass catchers out of the backfield. I think conventional wisdom, when you have someone who's a really good pass rusher like James Pierce is, you can also like kind of run at them to try to use their aggressiveness against them. Although James Pierce is a good run defender too. Like he's going to be a top 5 pick. So I don't mean to suggest that the only thing he can do is pass rush. That's not the case. And I don't maybe you play a little more 12 personnel in this game too. Ohio State has Will Kacmarek back, and I would assume fully healthy by the time that this game gets kicked off. Like, they didn't have that against Penn State. He was injured against Oregon. They didn't have that against Indiana, or it had a little bit against Indiana and a little bit against Michigan. Now you should be able to get a full game of snaps out of Will Kacmarek, who's definitely their best blocking tight end. So he gets put in the spotlight a little bit, but it's like all hands on deck. It's bigger personnel packages. It's Chip Kelly scheming it up. It's like leaving no stone kind of unturned to try to get the ball away from a guy like James Pierce. But the issue is, like, it's not merely James Pierce. The whole defensive line's good.
So you hear this sometimes, right? You ever hear this? You're talking about ball, and a team will say, like, they didn't do anything that they had showed on film. That teams like, well, I can't even remember. What was the game? Was it the Pitt defense off a bye week coming into the Syracuse game when they picked off Syracuse 5 times and Kyle McCord? And afterward, it was sort of like Pitt rebuilt its defense in 10 days and did. Is that what I'm right? That
yes,
I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you want Ohio State to do that offensively for this game? That they just break every tendency and just come out almost with a different style of offense? Would you want it? And would they be capable of doing it with the time they have?
I don't think you need to scrap the whole thing.
Okay.
I think they need to rethink the way they want to run the ball, because it's largely been an inside zone based run scheme. And I don't know that they're built to run that anymore without Seth McLaughlin at center.
Okay.
Because and Michigan actually did a nice job of, I think, aligning in a way that made that difficult too. But like, Seth McLaughlin was so good at doing what he needed to do initially, then getting up to the second level and helping those runs, hit for 5, 6, 7 instead of 2 and 3 every time. And I just, even if they change to Josh Padilla, maybe Josh Padilla plays better than Carson Hinsman did against Michigan. They're not going to find anything close to what they got from Seth McLaughlin, who's a Remington Trophy finalist, and I think he earned it. So I don't have the answers for what it should look like. I just feel like I have a pretty good idea that what they've done, what has sort of been like their base run play for much of this year, probably needs to change a little bit, whether that's going like more mid zone, more outside zone base, more gap scheme base, like running more counter and stuff like that. Getting the receivers involved on sweeps, like, throwing bubbles to the outside, even if the numbers don't tell you to, just like kind of do it to keep Tennessee honest, that kind of thing. So if things are going to change, that's probably where it starts. Ryan Day did kind of compare the situation the offense is now to what the defense was in after the Oregon game, and how they did kind of go back and have some honest conversation about what they've done to that point, what needs to change. And I thought the defense came out of that in a significantly better spot. So the offense stands a chance. Like, the defense had a week off after that to figure that out, and then came out against Nebraska and moving forward, I thought played pretty well. This offense will now have about 3 weeks to do the same. So there's definitely the opportunity to get something like that done.
So would you just, and I'm cognizant of this, so just you as a ball knower, will you give just people the 30-second thing of a zone run versus a gap run and what you're talking about and what's different about what the responsibilities are and what's good and bad about calling them?
Yeah, I mean, it would be like my rudimentary understanding of it. So like,
Sure.
I apologize if I kind of say it wrong to the more advanced level ball knowers out there. Like, gap schemes, I think, are designed to hit a specific gap. That's why they're called that, like specific area on the offensive line. And while like zone runs have aiming points, it doesn't always go to that place. And offensive linemen aren't necessarily just blocking the man in front of them. They might have to block down a gap and work with a teammate to kind of combo and then try to get up to a second level. Gap scheme, I think, just sort of simplifies who you're supposed to take on a given play is probably the way that I would describe it. But I'm leaving a good deal of the nuance out when I say that.
But also, so that idea, but if you have offensive linemen who are younger or a little less sure of themselves saying, block that guy, as opposed to read, block down, find the right guy to block, it can simplify it for them. In a gap scheme? Yes? No?
Yeah, I think I don't know that I'd say that 100%. Like, I think so. I think
this
so.
Is the last thing. I if you're apologizing for talking inside ball stuff, I apologize 10 times. But yeah, I shouldn't even say what I said.
I think I think there is something to the idea of gap scheme runs, or at least using them more, if not flipping entirely to that being your bread and butter, would suit this offensive line a little better because I don't know, they just weren't moving people the way they need to move them when they were trying to run inside zone against Michigan. So, and like Chip Kelly's done a good job of kind of balancing that throughout the year. If you look at the overall numbers, it's not like it's quite 50-50, but it's pretty close.
So
but in the Michigan
I did
game,
just look. So zone, this is according to PFF, zone runs 178, gap runs 159 on the year. In the Michigan game, zone 15, gap 9. Yeah. But Joel Klatt was talking about this during the game. He thought they were not having they weren't effectively running any zone schemes. And he was like, you've got to just run gap runs. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so for that balance, it was 15-9 in favor of zone. At the very least, maybe flip that. And again, you still want to have some balance and not just do the same thing every time. But if you can lean gap runs more, that seems like something that both you and Joel Klatt would suggest.
Yes. And also run Will Howard more.
How important do you think that is? And why do you think they haven't done it more so far?
I don't know. I don't know why they haven't done it more so far. Like, I think clearly they thought of that as something to only use in high leverage games. But then even then, like, his usage doesn't necessarily correlate with all the high leverage games. Like their worst nightmare almost came to bear against Michigan when he pulled the ball and ran it and got walloped and nearly got knocked out of the game. So like that's always on the back of your mind, but you have to protect yourself, protect your run schemes by getting the quarterback involved, or if you can't do that, then throw more RPOs. But I think Ohio State should do both in this game and moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's talk about like where fans are right now thinking about this. I sent this on Monday after the bracket was announced. Now that the bracket is out, how excited are you for Ohio State to play in the 12-team playoff? 10 is super excited. 1 is I just can't get fired up about this team right now. What do you think it was, Landis, on the survey results for our texters?
8.4.
7.55. But for a fan base coming off a Michigan loss in a year where there were national title expectations, I think 7.5 is pretty good. And again, we had talked about previously when it was like, when will you be ready for the playoff? I think we said it was like 89% of our dedicated, educated, loyal Ohio State fans, 89% said like, I'll be ready by the time the game gets here. In the like at various things, but it was like 11% thought like, oh, this Michigan game I'm not going to be over it by then.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you right now that Ohio State can beat Tennessee? 10 is very confident. 1 is not confident. What do you think it was?
8.1.
6.71. I expected it to be higher. And maybe it's just because of the way I was thinking about this, as I already laid it out. But I don't know if that 6.71 is like, well, why would I have a ton of faith of Ohio State to beat a good team right now? Or how much of it is people had an understanding of James Pierce, had an understanding of Dylan Sampson, and were accounting for that. My first blush was like, oh, I thought it'd be higher. But then if we're talking about matchups, I maybe get that people aren't like, oh, no, we're definitely going to beat Tennessee.
I think if you are an Ohio State fan trying to game it out and see who Ohio State might play in the first round, Tennessee was probably the team that gave you the most pause because of the matchup with the defensive line and how poorly Ohio State's offensive line played against Michigan and which was probably then not a super high confidence rate, was probably then lowered by Ryan Day saying they might move it around some more.
Right. I mean, compared to it is one of those things. I was saying the whole time, I'll take anything other than an Ohio State-Indiana rematch in the first round because that's just not interesting to me. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure there are Ohio State fans who are like, what are you talking about? We already controlled that team. Send Indiana back to the shoe. We're good with that, right?
Yeah, and I think like someone sent in a text, and I can't recall his name, so I apologize. But I hadn't thought of it, but it makes total sense, and I wonder how many people were thinking along the same way. Ohio State tried to shake up its offensive line going into the postseason last year, and it was a disaster. This is a playoff game. It's not a bowl game. The motivations are different. I think like Josh Padilla and or Luke Montgomery stand a better chance of performing than Enoch Vamahi did, because we had seen prior to that Enoch Vamahi wasn't quite ready to play for Ohio State. But if that is at all in anyone's mind, just how bad it was when all Ohio State did was move one of its guards to center and put in a new guard, and like it looked like they had never played a game before. I understand that entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. I also agree that it's not the exact same thing, but it's an interesting thing to bring up. On a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult do you think Ohio State's road to a national title would be? By top seeds winning, they'd play Tennessee, then Oregon, then Arizona State or Texas, and then Georgia. 10 is nearly impossible, and they can't win it all. 1 is very doable, and I like Ohio State's chances. So, like, the harder you think it is, you're more at a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you think it's really hard, what do you think the vote was?
9.1.
7.19.
I'm off today.
But you think, so when you think about that, and I guess, like, is it even, it's fun to ask these questions, right? But now I'm going back into coach speed, like one game at a time. So for Ohio State to be like, oh man, I hope we don't get Texas in the semis because it'll be in the Cotton Bowl and they'll have the home field advantage. Just like, you have to beat Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? Right? I mean, like that, I do feel like that's actually where this program is and where fans are, because we have officially entered the take nothing for granted portion of the Ohio State experience.
Yeah. I'm really surprised by that, because I feel like all I heard about after the draw came out was how difficult this particular pod was to try to get to the national championship. And then especially the scenario where it was like playing Oregon on the West Coast, playing Texas and Dallas, and playing potentially Georgia and Atlanta for the national title.
Right.
But also, I can't remember if we said it here or on Kings of the North, Ohio State favored in all those games.
I think you've espoused
Probably.
that idea of like,
Right.
Could Ohio State be? I mean, I don't. What makes you think that Ohio State would be favored over Oregon in the Rose Bowl if they beat Tennessee?
Because they were favored in Alton and then played a 1-point game.
I did say this, and I sent this to the texters, and I want to get your opinion on this. So if you're Ohio State, you have to assume that you have to beat Oregon to win the national title, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oregon's number 1 undefeated. Just, I mean, you know, you're not going to be sitting around, I hope Arizona State knocks out Oregon so we don't have to play them or whatever. So if you're going to have to play them, I'm curious about the rust versus rest and how that will play out with buys. And we've seen this enough in the NFL playoffs, right? It comes up in every sport where there are buys. We see it in baseball, right? The team that wins the wild card round, they got some juices flowing if the other team's sitting there. So Oregon will be off for 24 days by the time they play in the Rose Bowl. And Ohio State will have played whatever it is, 11 days before the Rose Bowl and beating Tennessee if they're going to be there. I think you could make the argument that if Ohio State's going to have to beat Oregon to win it all, this is the spot where you'd want it to happen. Where maybe, or is it like, no, it's all a rest advantage. There's no rust worry. And so that Ohio State's had to play an extra game right here. Because the other thing is, Oregon played in the Big Ten Championship. Ohio State didn't. So they will have played the same number of games since the end of the regular season. It's just, when did you play it? But if you want to, I at least wanted to float the idea of getting Oregon when they haven't played for 3 weeks. Okay. And Ohio State played a week and a half earlier. Maybe this is when you'd say, we'll take the Ducks now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. Only like, and the only thing I'm using as my guide is like how teams have played in playoff semifinals, like prior to the 12 team, where like just feels like those games are like usually pretty high scoring and the teams are in pretty good form. So,
okay.
I think you're going to get a pretty good version of Oregon there.
All right. I'm still a little bit in 2006 mode of what happens when you don't play since Thanksgiving and then you have whatever it was, 42 days off. So
Mike says that Oregon is currently a 1.5 point favorite on FanDuel against Ohio State in a hypothetical Rose Bowl.
Oh,
Ohio State.
Okay.
Ohio State would be a 1.5 point underdog if they were to play Oregon in the Rose Bowl. If Tennessee was to play Oregon in the Rose Bowl, Oregon would be a 4.5 point favorite.
Okay. So
they have
that's
hypothetical
about
lines for all the
They do? Oh,
quarter
interesting.
games. Yeah. So for
I mean,
example,
we're basically
if Georgia was to play Indiana, they'd be 4.5 point favorites.
Would Notre Dame be favored over Georgia then?
Georgia would be a 1.5 point favorite over Notre Dame.
Okay.
I kind of think that's all fake. I think those lines will change based off what happens in the first
Obviously, they could,
Yeah,
but that's just hypothetical what they're setting
Can you
lines
bet
at now.
those? You can bet those now, and then if the game doesn't happen, you just get your money back?
Yeah.
If you bet on Ohio State, Oregon, and then Tennessee wins, you just get your money refunded? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So basically, but the bottom line is it's a coin flip game, just like the game in Autzen was a coin flip game. So that the number 8 seed on a neutral field is viewed as a coin flip game against the undefeated number 1 team in the country. And I don't think that's wrong. So that it's, if people, we talked about that. I get, people know Kings of the North exists by now. It's a separate feed. You guys get that. But we had a Wednesday show. We had a Wednesday show with Ari joined us. And like Ari is just basically like, there is nothing more interesting than what's going to happen with Ohio State right now. Both as a team, but then also as a program, and like the what ifs of like, if they don't win, then what does it mean for Ryan Day? Do you think Ohio State is like the pivot point of this whole thing? Because I will say this before you answer, which is, is that your favorite thing about doing shows with me, where they ask you a question and then interrupt you before you even get to start to answer?
It's fine.
You know the deal by now. Shahan, our friend Shahan Jeharaja, who I used to do a show with, he was texting me the other day because for CBS Sports, they were making their predictions and he just wanted to ask me some stuff about Ohio State. And then I don't know what I said, but he picked Ohio State to win the national championship. And his big pivot point is, okay. And I think a lot of people would think this way. It's like, if you're going to pick Ohio State to beat Oregon, then you very well might be picking Ohio State to win the national championship. And I don't know that nobody would go so far as to say that potential quarterfinal is the real national championship game. But in the side of your brain, like you could you sort of are thinking that. Do you understand that if people do kind of have that in their head?
For sure. But I would also take it around earlier, and I would just say, if Ohio State beats Tennessee, that probably means Ohio State has like flushed whatever it was lingering from the Michigan game and just sort of like back to being the team that was a national title favorite before then, the team that, along with Oregon, everyone thought was one of the 2 best teams in the country. So then why, like, it's like you get past that initial hurdle. And like Ryan Day talked about this too. He compared Ohio State to like a wild card team in pro sports, that a lot of times you see that wild card team, whether it's a series or even the NFL, like win that initial game. And it just gives you so much confidence moving forward that you kind of just play fast and loose from there. And I think that's something that Ohio State is trying to cultivate, but it needs to get past this first one. So if you believe that they'll beat Tennessee, then I actually think it's pretty reasonable to pick them to win the national championship because the roster is still very good. The offensive line is going through some stuff, but the roster otherwise is still very good. So it's like, how much confidence do you have in them really snapping back from the Michigan game and playing well and beating Tennessee?
Okay. All right. So the people thought the path was a 7.19 on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is the last question I asked Landon. No, actually it's not. I asked 2 more. Who do you think will win the national title? I gave them all the teams. Who do you think our educated, dedicated, loyal Ohio State fans picked as the team to win the national title? Who won that vote?
Oregon.
That is correct. What percent of the vote do you think they got?
44.
Good guess. 51. So over half picked Oregon. What team do you think is second?
Ohio State.
What percent do you think they got?
41.
29%. Georgia third at 12%, Notre Dame fourth, Texas fifth, Penn State sixth, and like nobody else basically got any votes. Like 1 vote for some other people. So I also don't, of course, I mean, come on, right? But also, I don't know that is an unreasonable thing if you were asking a national college football audience. Yeah, more than half pick Oregon, but then the number 2 pick is Ohio State. I'm not sure that wouldn't be true elsewhere.
No, I think it is perfectly, it's very understandable that if the Rose Bowl is Ohio State versus Oregon, then like you think the national champ's coming out of that game. Like I
Yes.
don't think I could like in good conscience pick Ohio State to win the national title right now because I'm very much still up in the air on whether or not I think it'll beat Tennessee. But again, like if you're confident in then Ohio State beating Tennessee, then I just think that like that just boosts you the rest of the bracket and just gives you a different perspective on what you think Ohio State is and will be.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Because if they're not over the Michigan loss and they haven't fixed their offensive line issues, then they just lose to Tennessee and that's it.
Yeah, and part of that for me is like we've only talked to Ryan Day since the Michigan game. We will talk to players before then. We'll just be able to get like a better read on like the energy around the team, I think. So I'm not sitting here on, a week and a half before the game saying that I'm not picking Ohio State. I just feel like I don't have enough information yet to make a call either way.
Vibes like that always matter to me.
Yeah. They matter to me. Maybe at times too much, but they definitely matter to me.
I was always but especially in bowl season, like I was always very interested in, because usually, and everything's different now, but like it used to be, you'd get like a media day locally, and then you'd go out to the bowl site.
Yeah.
And then always be, let's see how everybody's vibing on both sides when we get to the bowl site and just the way people are talking and acting. And so we won't have that same opportunity for this, but getting some handle on this from what these guys say, I do think matters. So 51% Oregon, 29% Ohio State. And then this didn't match up exactly, but this is, voting is difficult. We'll ask this again right before the first round games, but I wanted to ask it now. What do you think Ohio State will do in the playoff? So I won't make do you want to guess or do you want to break? Should I just tell you?
Just tell me. I've been wrong every time.
45% lose to Oregon in the quarterfinals. 45%. 27% win the national title. 15% lose to Tennessee in the first round. 10% lose in the semis. 3% lose in the national title game. So only at this point, 15% of people saying, I think they're one and done. And
what's the combined percentage of them getting past Oregon then? Was it like 30 something percent?
27, 37, 40. 40%.
Okay.
40% get past Oregon. So that's where we are. That was just some boys chatting. That was just some chopping it up. That wasn't our most intense breakdown of me not really understanding football and knowing 3 Tennessee players. So I apologize, but sometimes
I think it's good to give a first pass. It's good to give a first pass, and then we'll dive in more next week. Yeah.
All right. So then the other part of the show is redrafting the best Ohio State Buckeyes right now. This is something we did in the preseason. When was the other time we did it? Did you say it was like right before the Penn State game?
It was October 23rd. So that would have been, I believe, after the Oregon game, before the Nebraska game.
Okay. So, yeah, because we knew Josh Simmons was hurt by that point, but we still drafted him because he had played everything except a half to that point in the season. So we were still drafting him at that point. Yeah. So
the Nebraska game was the 26th. So it was like 2 days before the Nebraska game. Yeah.
But now, and we did it during the bye week, right? That's when we did it. We did it during that bye week in between Oregon and Nebraska, probably.
No, we did it. We did it because the bye week after Oregon was like, what's up? And then the Wednesday before the Nebraska game was when we did the draft.
Okay. Yeah. People were not in a drafting mood. We did. Yeah. What's up? Sometimes you got to do a what's up show. Okay. So the first time out, Caleb Downs was the number 1 pick in the preseason for the most important best Buckeye. Mid-year, Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 pick, and Caleb Downs was second. So just to we'll cover this as we run through this, and we don't want to drag this out too long. Well, except it's me hosting, so like I have a tendency to drag everything out for too long. The top 10 mid-year, Jeremiah Smith 1, Caleb Downs 2, Emeka Ibuka 3. He was 3 in the preseason and 3 in the middle of the year. Number 4, Seth McLaughlin. Number 5, Will Howard. 6, Quinshon Judkins. 7, Trevion Henderson. 8, Josh Simmons. 9, Tyleik Williams. 10, Lathan Ransom. So that's where we are. And I will give you first pick. And who do you think is the number 1 best Buckeye?
Caleb Downs. He just like really turned it up, I think, a few notches around the midway point of the season. And I thought he was very good in the Michigan game, and I forget which national Thorpe Award finalist, I think. So
yeah,
deserving of the accolades. I know like his production is not as good as it was at Alabama. I think that's more of a conversation about style of defense than it is quality of play, because he's been very good. So I think he has been without a doubt their best player, and I think stands a very good chance of being their best player in the postseason.
So that makes sense to me as the number one pick. Is Jeremiah Smith still the number 2 pick?
Yeah, I think you can make that call if you're being a little forward looking as well, because it's time to give the young man the ball, right? So
it is time to give the young man the ball. And middle of the year, right? We were at this point with him because it felt like he was really asserting himself. As we sit here now, Emeka Egbuka 81 targets in the passing game, Jeremiah Smith 78, Carnell Tate 51. But at that point, he had 9 catches on 13 targets in the Oregon game, right, for 100 yards. And we were like, okay, here we go. And then again, I think we talked about that elsewhere. But since then, number of targets per game, 477, 657. So he has 1 double-digit target game for the entire year. And there's more there like, what's up? All right, I'll take him second. Like, what's up? What would you do? And why aren't they maybe maximizing him as much as we think they could?
We talked about this on the podcast daily that you guys can listen to on Wednesday as well. But I mentioned the fact, like, we're watching the Bengals on Monday Night Football when Jamar Chase, I think, got 18 targets and they gave him a carry. And it's like that. I feel like that's what it needs to be. Maybe not 18 because 18 is a lot, but I think that is the idea moving forward. And then Austin made the good point of like, well, he was hurt against Northwestern. I think very clearly wasn't moving the same way he normally had against Indiana. And maybe there was something lingering there too against Michigan that has kept Jeremiah in the last couple of games from being his full self and being the focal point of the offense. I think there's some merit to that. I also feel like watching the Michigan game, he seemed to move fine. But I wonder if that's any part of it too. So like, what's up is like got their head up their own butts about running the ball up the middle too much and didn't involve their receivers enough. It was 23 combined targets for the 3 guys, right? So that number needs to come up, and the number definitely needs to come up for Jeremiah Smith.
Tied for 51st in targets in the Power 4. So now the one thing is Ryan Williams, the freshman at Alabama, has 1 more target than Jeremiah Smith. So I don't know if this is a little bit of like just making sure you get a freshman to the end of the year. And we're not saying that they need to be Ty Felton with 143 targets in 12 games for Maryland and like carrying that team. But like Jaden Higgins at Iowa State, they have 2 receivers there at Iowa State, and they also want to run the ball a little bit. He has 130 targets, right? Like there are ways to do this. Tetairoa McMillan at Arizona has 130 targets.
What's the combined targets for Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll?
Higgins is 130, Knoll is 109. So 239 targets for the 2 best Iowa State receivers and 159 for the 2 best Ohio State receivers. So 80 fewer targets. And it's not like Matt Campbell is running the air raid there, right? Like it just could be more. It just could be more. And it's hard to not be frustrated, and we understand it, but Ryan Day did say, right, we have to find a way to what did he say about like the receivers, and we have to find a way to let our best guys like go win the game for us? Was it basically that?
Something to that effect. Yeah, it was too long ago for me to remember what the exact wording was, but it was like, do whatever it takes to win the game. Don't get caught up in like what you would like to do. Like just do what makes the most sense. And obviously for what makes the most sense for Ohio State is like not to erase Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson from the game plan. That's not what we're talking about, but to let your receivers, the thing that makes you most different from almost every other team in college football, be the thing that leads you to a championship.
Yes. Okay. So can we make a prediction here as we're just 2 guys chopping it up? Are they going to do that?
Yes, I think they will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we say, so Egbuka and Smith had 19 targets against Oregon, and we don't know what the weather's going to be in. We get it. You got to run the ball and we get it. But can we set an over-under, if assuming it's a normal offensive game with the normal number of possessions and Ohio State doesn't have 3 pick sixes for them, so their offense is on the field? Can we set an over-under of 20 targets for Smith and Ibuka?
Yeah, I think so.
And they got to go over.
Go over, and I would mix in some runs with that too.
Yeah, touches. Yeah, we're for that. What do you like better? Would you rather hand it? Would you rather throw them a bubble screen, or would you rather hand it to them on some kind of jet sweep action?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, either one's fine with me. I don't know that I have a preference. I guess it would depend on how your offensive line's blocking that day.
I'm not like, sometimes I like this stuff, the jet sweep stuff, where you're giving the ball like on the move. Because sometimes it can be frustrating of like you're throwing a bubble screen to a flat-footed guy and you were relying on a single block from his friend out there. And when you're flat-footed, if your friend doesn't make the block, it might be over before it gets started.
Sure.
Whereas if you're giving a guy the ball on the move and now you at least can make a little bit of a read, and somebody on the end of the line is going to be a tight end or a tackle or a slot receiver cracking down, right? That's going to have to do something for you, but you have a little bit more of an ability to make it happen yourself, as opposed to, because again, it's one of those things like 2 years ago, people were ready to throw bubble screens out of the playbook entirely with the way Ohio State threw them constantly and then missed blocks, right?
You're going to see a lot of bubble screens on December 21st from both teams.
Both sides? All right. Yeah. So then you got to block. So this is like Carnell Tate money making time, which again, he is a and this is one of those, this is the thing, and we'll get to the rest of the draft, but like, right, let your best guys doing what they do best determine the outcome of the game. So are you willing to put very key plays on Carnell Tate's perimeter blocking?
Yeah,
I am. Yeah. Like, that seems like a good matchup. I'll take that, right? This is one of those, again, it was just one play in a game where Ohio State dominated, but when Ohio State got stopped on the goal line against Indiana, and that play was, I think, one of their third string tight end trying to block Mikhail Kamara, because that's how things lined up. And it's like, well, there are matchups all over the field that Ohio State would win, but you pinned that play on that matchup, and that's a bad matchup for Ohio State. Don't pin key plays where you are creating bad matchups for yourself. And I feel like they do that too much.
Yeah, they do. I think it's Carnell Tate. I think like Will Kasmerick in space could be, I mean, he's at the very least better than G. Scott. So doing those kind of things. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there on the edges. Because
there also can be times, and it's right, it's like we're going to throw a tunnel screen, but this tunnel screen is going to rely on Tegra Shabola getting out and making a block on a linebacker. And we're getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith, but if our below average guard doesn't get to the second level, the play's dead. It's like, okay, then I don't want to run that play. Well, I don't want to create that matchup.
They have blocked tunnel screens pretty well this year. And I think the one thing they definitely need to do in this game, which is another thing I said on Podcast Daily, so I do apologize for repeating myself. They need to get Jeremiah Smith the ball in other ways besides just throwing it to him down the field. I think his average depth of targets like 13 yards. Throw him a slant, throw him a tunnel, throw him a bubble. He is excellent with the ball in his hands after the catch. And they do not tap into that enough, in my opinion. So they need to do that in this game and whatever happens after.
No, that sounds lovely. You've got a direct line, right? Right to the top?
No.
Rye, Chip,
nice.
What's up?
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Okay. Work on that. All right. Number 3. Who are you taking third?
Jeremiah Smith, by the way, average depth of target is 13 yards. It leads the team. Emeka Ibuka is a 7.8.
And that is, and it's just like, it depends what mood you're in, right? Whether you think a low depth of target or a deep depth of target is good or bad. But if the goal is get the ball in the guy's hands, that's the first priority, then that's too much. 13's too much.
I think it is indisputable with Will Howard's skill set as a quarterback that constantly throwing Jeremiah Smith the ball down the field is not the right course of action.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that. All right. So just again, by the way, Jeremiah Smith in the preseason was 7th because we were holding ourselves back as reasonable men of honor.
We were.
First in the middle of the year. He's 2nd now. Caleb Downs was 1st in the beginning of the year, 2nd in the middle of the year, and 1st now. Who are you taking third?
This might be off the board or surprising. I'm going to take Cody Simon.
That's a good pick. So we're noting, as you guys already know by now, like the first team, all Big Ten guys. So Caleb Downs, first pick, all Big Ten first team. Jeremiah Smith, second pick, all Big Ten first team. Cody Simon, third pick, all Big Ten first team, at least for one of the groups. And it is shocking, the right word? What we would have thought in the preseason that Cody Simon's the third best Buckeye entering the postseason.
Yeah, I guess maybe there. Yeah, I would say so. I don't think it's shocking that he's played well. He has showed us in the 2 years since he was a starter and then lost a starting job that he was getting better. And I think last year he was their best linebacker. He didn't play the snaps of their number one linebacker, but he was their best linebacker last year.
Yep.
He is again, I think like far more athletic than people realize. And it does seem like the thing that the defense came out of the Oregon game, I think most keen on was blitzing more effectively. And Cody Simon really feels like the guy that's unlocked a lot there. He's not the only one, but I think he's the one that's maybe done it the most and the best. And I think he's just been really solid otherwise. Like he has his shortcomings as a linebacker, no doubt. Like you don't love him in pass coverage all the time, but I don't think he's a total liability in that area either. I think he's just a pretty solid all around linebacker. And he is definitely the leader of the defense. And at this point, maybe even the team. So he got some bonus points for me there too. But I think he's been consistent. There are three guys on the defense. We've picked Caleb Downs already. Cody Simon's one of them. And there's one more, I think, that have been very consistent and consistently good for basically the entire season.
Yeah. But so he was 16th in the preseason and 15th in the middle of the year for us. And I feel like he took off right after we drafted. And in the second half of the year, he's been the glue guy, the linchpin, the leader, but also a high-level performer for the defense. So this is one of those where it's like, this is not just like, oh, he's a good captain. It's like, this guy makes plays too. So I don't dispute this. I'll take him.
Sorry, just Cody Simon, 10 tackles against Oregon, 10 tackles against Penn State, 10 tackles against Indiana, and 9 tackles against Michigan.
Yeah. He's a real dude. And I was surprised he made first team all Big Ten, only because there's a lot of issues with voting and it's just hard for people to know this, but I was glad he did. Because it's like, oh, people actually recognized it. Like this guy
was deserved. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'll take Ibuka. He was third in the preseason, third in the middle of the year. I'll take him fourth here. And on KOTN, we did something we called the most dangerous player in every region. And I picked Emeka for the Oregon, Tennessee, Ohio State region, mostly because you've dubbed him Big Game Mech and don't get no bigger than this.
Yeah, he is Big Game Mech. And he's also Ohio State. I was looking on Sports Info Solutions. He is Ohio State's most targeted receiver on screens. And if we think the offense is going to lean a little more into that, then I think you'll see more Emeka.
Okay. Fifth, who are you taking?
Lathan Ransom, who is the third defender that I was alluding to. He's actually the highest graded defender on Ohio State's defense. According to PFF, he is one of the highest graded defenders in the country. He had the one blip or drop in play when he had Dylan Gabriel in space and he missed the tackle and Dylan Gabriel scored a touchdown. But aside from that, I think he's been awesome this year. And it's been made apparent to me over the course of this season with how well Lathan has played, just how much Ohio State missed him the back end of last season too. So he and Downs together, I think, have been everything you could have hoped they would be, if not more than that. And I don't think, for as good as Caleb Downs has been, and yes, he gets more publicity, and I think that is deserved. I think Lathan Ransom has been almost right there with him with how he's played.
Okay. Nice steady progression. 15th to 10th to 5th in our 3 drafts for Lathan Ransom. Safety-driven defense.
Yep.
2 really good safeties. Is there a little bit of a line here in your mind? Or is there like this is kind of the top 5, like as you were thinking through this? Okay.
Yep.
So can we have a little conversation here of how many guys have been better than expected on this team? And I think maybe all 5, maybe Emeka Egbuka is as good as expected, and maybe the same for Caleb Downs because the expectations were so high. But that is one part of this season is that I don't know how many not out of nowhere, but just guys you say, wow, that guy, I thought that guy would be good, but he's great. Or I wasn't sure about that guy, but he turned out to be really good. I think the guy who exceeded expectations the most probably is Cody Simon, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then maybe Lathan Ransom in that mix, but I don't know that there's 11 guys that would fit that bill.
No, I think there are a couple of others. I think there are guys who started off slow and changed their expectations and then exceeded that lower bar, kind of, if that makes sense.
Okay.
There aren't 11. I would say maybe there are 4 or 5.
Okay. I'm getting to the point, and I think people understand this. I have not been at that many Ohio State games. I'm getting worried I'm going to make bad picks. So you may yell at me if I make a bad pick. Okay.
Okay. Sounds great.
Jack Sawyer?
That's probably who I would have picked next. So
okay. So I'll take Jack Sawyer 6th. Jack Sawyer in the preseason was 5th. And then in the middle of the season was 11th. He does lead the team in pressures by a lot. By PFF, yes. He has 42 pressures, and JT Tuimoloau has 31. And then next to the 2 linebackers, Sonny Styles and Cody Simon with 15 each. The bottom line is pressures are nice. They've got to get home. We understand that. But he still is their greatest threat on the defensive line, right? I mean, Tyleik Williams is still good, but who has a chance to really just be disruptive, right? Who's going to mess up Nico Iamaleava?
Yeah, I think the one thing with Jack Sawyer is we thought he had 6 sacks last year, and he had 3 in the Cotton Bowl against Missouri, and we're okay, here comes Jack Sawyer, and that sack production obviously didn't translate, and I've sort of been waiting for the moment where it sparks and he kind of goes on a similar run this year. That hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll happen in the postseason, but his pressure numbers are good, pressure rate's good. His run defense, I think, has been very consistent. I voted in the all Big Ten stuff.
Yep.
And the only Ohio State defensive lineman I voted for was Jack Sawyer. You could pick 12 across the league. The only guy I picked was Jack. Because I think he's very clearly been their best defensive lineman.
Okay. Thanks. I feel better.
Yeah, of course.
Who are you picking 7th?
Don't know who to pick now. I had a mini big board here. So I have a guy in the 7th slot that hasn't been picked yet, but I'm nervous to pick him because I don't want people to get mad at me. I guess I'll just pick him and see what you think. I'll take Will Howard.
Oh. This is very, very difficult because take away
he's coming off his worst. He's coming off his worst game.
Take away 5 plays in the second half of the season. It's hard, but when you're a quarter, you just said Lathan Ransom, as good as Lathan Ransom's been, you remembered the missed tackle on Dylan Gabriel. Mm-hmm. So it's Will Howard. It's the pick 6 against Penn State and then the 2 picks against Michigan are maybe the 3 worst plays that anybody's made for Ohio State this season.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are game losing, back breaking plays. But the rest is pretty good. So it's I don't know. It's a very difficult. I don't know what the right answer is. I hope people don't yell at you too much for this. I'm not going to yell.
Yell at me, whatever. That's fine. I don't particularly care about that. I just want to I want to not be off base with it, I guess. And I think it's a conversation of well, who now what we got in this point, would you say is playing really well? And I don't know that there is an obvious answer to that now that we've gotten to this point in our draft. There are guys who have played well at times during the year, and other guys who have I think played well on a smaller workload, but not starter level workload for the entire year, and is just playing aces, right? So, right. Will Howard just came off his worst game of the year, no doubt about it. I'm not trying to paint that any other way than what it was. But I thought he was really good against Oregon. I thought he was good against Penn State after the pick 6. I thought he was good against Indiana. I thought he was good against Iowa. Up until last week, I thought he has handled everything about being Ohio State's starting quarterback well. the pressures, the praise, all of it. He's still third in the country in passing efficiency.
Right.
So like I'm trying to take like the whole body of work into account here and not just go off what we saw the last time he was on the field. So I feel okay picking him here in the number 7 slot. And I think like what we saw against Michigan could it's Ohio State's hope anyway, that was the worst we'll see of him, and he'll turn it back up and be the guy that I think we saw more often than not in big games, which is a guy that played well enough for Ohio State to win.
So I was doing this on KOTN when you weren't there. And again, we're going to do a big breakdown of all 12 playoff teams, but I was trying to do sort of like what are the teams in the playoff that feel like with their quarterback, that's my guy, let's ride. Like we're good. Mm-hmm. And I think I put 7 guys in that category: Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, Sam Levitt at Arizona State, Drew Aller at Penn State, Riley Leonard at Notre Dame, Curtis Rourke at Indiana, Kevin Jennings at SMU, and Cade Klubnik at Clemson. But I did not put Will Howard in that category. I put Will Howard in the next category, which is like with Nico Iamaleava, which was more like, pretty good, but like, we're not like, and it's just because of those handful of mistakes. Yeah. And when you look at like what happened to Ohio State, the loss to Michigan devastated their season and perhaps put the tenure of Ryan Day on the brink and completely changed everything about their season and screwed up their playoff seeding and everything. And he threw 2 back-breaking picks in that game. And if he doesn't throw one of them, if one of them is just a bad throw that's out of bounds and it's not a pick, they might win. Either of them.
Sure.
So that is very hard to process. And it is very hard to process when like 97% of the time you really like what this guy's about. But the 3% might have changed their season forever. So I don't know. I would not have taken him this high, but it's very hard to process. Do you agree would you put him in the here's our guy, let's ride category? Or no, I don't think that I don't tier below.
I don't know that you could do that based off what happened the last time we saw him. I wouldn't put Cade Klubnik in there because it's not a conversation like, of course he's the starting quarterback. It's like, has there been a consistent level of play this year that you're like, this guy can go win us a national title? I think you probably would stop short of putting Will Howard in that category.
Yeah. So if we want
to, I think he can like quickly put himself back into it if he plays well against Tennessee.
Yeah, and avoids. And I mean, we've had this conversation a million times. It's like, well, it makes you a little nervous, but as long as he doesn't make a killer mistake, you're okay. And it's like, well, made the killer mistake.
Because if you would have had him in that category before the Michigan game, or no?
I would, because I thought the Penn State pick was a little bit more like, well, everybody gets a mulligan. Mm-hmm. And then he had 2 more mulligans in the only game that matters. And it's like, okay, well, now I changed how I think of you. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
So I get it, though. And also part of it here is like, I don't know who's jumping up to demand to be drafted. So I'll take Sonny Styles.
Yeah, I think so. Sonny didn't play well against Michigan either.
Not like, it's the good. It's like
nobody played well.
Yeah,
against Michigan.
Right,
like,
right.
How much do you let that impact your entire process here? And maybe the answer is a lot. But like, no, he had. I like with the Iowa game after the Michigan State game. I was like, I don't know if this guy can play linebacker for Ohio State.
Right.
And then the Iowa game, like he got into a linebacker friendly game, and I just thought that gave him like a ton of confidence. And he played, I think, really well in almost every game since then, and then kind of reverted back to some bad habits against Michigan. So,
I
think like, in the name of, I don't know, pick kind of whoever you want at this point. Like, I guess he's as good a pick as any. Maybe there are people like screaming at their computers or car radios or whatever, saying we've not put someone very obvious up there yet. But I'm okay with it, I think, to put Sonny at number 8.
I think, right? Yeah. Rough, uncertain first 4 games, and then 7 games of like really getting better and settling in, and then a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? So there was another guy I almost picked who maybe I should have, but I'll take Sonny Styles 8th. He was 11th in the preseason, 14th in the middle of the year. Who do you take at 9?
I'll take Travion Henderson.
That's the guy I maybe should have taken instead.
But again, it's a similar thing. It's like Travion's looked like so fresh and explosive in a lot of the games this year, and then I thought he reverted back to some bad habits against Michigan. So I think this is like the best version of Trey we've seen in his career. And I think being in the tandem with Quinshon Judkins helps that tremendously.
Yeah,
I would like to see him get more involved as a pass catcher. We saw a quick spurt of it against Purdue. But haven't seen a ton of it before. Didn't see a ton of it before. Haven't seen a ton of it since then. So I think there's more there. But his pass blocking has been good. He's been good without the ball in his hands too, which I respect. So, yeah, I'll put him ninth. And I think maybe I don't know if we did it in every exercise, but I'm pretty sure the last one we like paired Travion and Quinshon together. I think we took them back to back.
Yeah, we did. Last exercise we took Quinshon 6 and Travion 7. Yeah. So Travion was 12th in the preseason, 7th in the middle of the season. He's 9th now. Could Travion Henderson beat Tennessee? Could he be the reason Ohio State advances?
Yeah, I think so. Especially if the idea now is stop running inside so much and get the ball like outside the tackles a little bit and get a guy like Quinshon Judkins is capable of hitting home runs too, but that's probably where Travion is most comfortable when he can operate kind of outside the box like that.
Because I don't think like when we're having this discussion about using your guys the best way and get it like that's not just a receiver conversation. I think it is also about getting Travion Henderson outside. Mm-hmm. So if they just give him a few more opportunities there, again, he is one of the more explosive running backs in the country. Dylan Sampson's awesome. Travion Henderson could be the best running back in this game and lead Ohio State into the Rose Bowl. Like I don't think that's off the table at all. And in all the conversations that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are having right now, like that should be front of mind just as much as getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, I think so. It's creating explosive plays and limiting explosive plays, and Travion is high up on the list of guys who can give you an explosive play.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to see what you think about this. How about Donovan Jackson? Because he's saving them by doing something that's not his most comfortable thing, but literally, if he didn't do it, they might just have to play with 4 offensive linemen.
Yeah,
so, tip of the cap, as you said.
They literally don't have another guy who can play tackle. So, because then Michalski's hurt, even if you wanted to put him out there. Clearly, they don't think George Fitzpatrick is ready, or else he'd be the left tackle. So, and then you're talking about like playing a freshman in Ian Moore. So he is very much saving their butts right now, and I think kind of battling as best he can. There have been times even where I thought to myself, like, is Donovan playing a little better at tackle than he was a guard? It's not been consistent, but I think there have been those moments. So like, does the level of play totally merit him being 10th? I would say probably not. But combined with the situation Ohio State's in and how much he's helping them right now, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah. And first team All Big Ten. So
the Big Ten loves some Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, they do. All right. Who are you taking 11th?
Carnell Tate.
Oh. Get that.
I think
like
turned it up a little bit back half of the season. I want to pull up what his targets have been.
Carnell Tate 17th in the preseason, 16th in the middle of the season, jumping to 11th now.
Yeah, so he was 5 targets against Akron, 3 against Western Michigan, 4 against Marshall, 5 against Michigan State, only 2 against Oregon, 4 against Nebraska, 3 against Penn State, and then they started finding him more. It was 7 against Purdue, 5 against Northwestern, 4 against Indiana, and 9 against Michigan. 6 carries for 58 yards. Good blocker, I think, has shown himself to be a mostly reliable receiver. He has had a drop or two. He had a pretty pivotal drop against Michigan on a play that if he makes that catch, who knows how that drive might go and how the game might end. I'm not putting it all on him. There was a lot going on there, but I think is like ready to be a part of this offense in a significant way, and I think he's demonstrated that much. And if teams are keying on Jeremiah Smith, which it felt like Michigan was at times, or Emeka Egbuka, then Carnell Tate, I think, is capable of being that third option that you just kind of don't have an answer for. And then his blocking, I think, is going to be at a real premium now that Ohio State, I think, it has settled on the idea of they need to be more perimeter based with their offense.
Yeah. Okay. We got a lot of guys that got to get in space. So Carnell Tate is number 11. Okay. I will take JT Tuimoloau 12th. I am super curious to see what he ends up being as a pro, because I probably feel like the number one player that I had the toughest time getting a handle on, and then the NFL showed that I was an idiot, was Pete Werner. I just never had a handle on Pete Werner. That's like, oh, he's a second round pick and an every down starter in the NFL. It's like, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if Pete Werner was good. He was good. Yeah. I don't know what to think here, but if JT Tuimoloau is like the 35th pick in the draft and just goes out and has like a 10-year career in the NFL, it's like, okay, I'm sorry. I completely was too meh on this guy the whole time he was here. But I think most of the time we've talked about him is like, he's good. He's just not an elite pass rusher. So he's a 3-time first team All Big Ten, which is like, okay, I guess I get it. But also, I don't know that he deserved to be first team All Big Ten this year with some of the other defensive linemen they have in this league, but I'll take him 12th. And we've sort of thought the same thing about him all year. He was 10th in the preseason, 13th in the middle of the year, 12th now.
He's the same guy he's always been, which is like a good player, right? It's that's certainly an above average Big Ten player. Always been very good against the run, and just leaves you wanting a little more with sack production. But maybe all that means is that he's going to play in the NFL as a 3-4 defensive end for 12 years and make a lot of money, right? Yeah. So I would very much like to see either he or Jack Sawyer or both like really turn it up in the postseason and like kind of go out on a note that makes you think like, well, where's this been your entire career kind of thing, but in a way that leads Ohio State to someplace nice.
Okay, 13 to you.
I will take I guess I'll take Tyleik Williams. Okay. And I really do think he's just not been himself since he got injured in the middle of the year. He missed the Purdue game. And like it was a game time decision another time, but ended up playing. And I do think his production has dropped off a little bit, but so I still think he's deserving here. And I could certainly see a situation where now, presumably healthier, we start to see kind of the old Tyleik in the playoff, which is a defensive tackle who can be a bit of a problem.
Yeah. I thought it was between two guys. He was one, and the other is who I'll take 14th, which is Quinshon Judkins. But can you help me with this? In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In 4 of the last 7 games, Quinshon Judkins has averaged less than 3 yards per carry.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Michigan game, it was 3.8, and that's one of the good ones. Is this just an offensive line conversation / Mason Graham conversation, or like what's up?
Well, I think it's partly an offensive line conversation. It has to be. We're gonna look. Ohio State as a team averaged 2.9 rushing against Michigan, 3.9 rushing against Indiana, 5.2 against Notre Dame, was under 5 yards a carry against Purdue and Penn State, and 2 yards per carry against Nebraska. So there's a lot of offensive line in that. I've also thought for the back half of the season, maybe that Quinshon Judkins is not seeing things real well. I don't know if he's pressing because the offensive line is not what it was in the first half of the year, that maybe those creases are a little more difficult to find, or he feels like he needs to do more to help pick up the offensive line being shorthanded, whatever it is. I don't know if we're seeing the best of him consistently. There have been runs like in every game where it's like, there it is. That's the guy we've seen for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I just don't, it's just not happening enough. So maybe some time off here might help him sort of like recalibrate, or maybe seeing an SEC team across from him, which he's very familiar with, might bring out something different in him too. It's like, I don't think he's played poorly. I don't think like he's had bad effort or anything like that. I just think he's getting caught up a little bit and perhaps trying to do too much and maybe not seeing some opportunities that have been there for him.
Okay. 6th and 6th in the previous 2 and now 14th. Did we wait too long on him, or is this about right by the Landis big board?
I had him 9th on the big board paired with Travion, but honestly, like between 8 and like 14, I wasn't going to fight you too much in whatever order you decided to put some of these guys in.
Okay. 15th to you.
I'll take Arvell Reese.
Oh, nice. Okay. Not on the board in either previous draft.
I think he's played pretty well when they've used him. Like they use him almost exclusively as a third linebacker when they play in a 4-3. That's kind of how his role shook out this year. He's a Mike linebacker when Ohio State plays in a 4-3 defense. But I think he's been pretty good in that role. I've been waiting to see if they try to use him a little more as a blitzer, kind of outside of that, maybe when they're in their base defense, and that hasn't really come to fruition yet. But that could be like the kind of defensive wrinkle maybe that Ohio State starts to show in the postseason. I'm not going to get my hopes too high for that, but it's an option at the very least. But I think he's been fairly reliable for a young player stepping into a big spot, and maybe has even been over the course of the entire season, perhaps even a little bit more consistent than Sonny Styles has been. So I'm not saying like he should play over Sonny necessarily, but I don't know that I would hate the idea of rotating Arvell Reese a little more in the base defense if Ohio State wanted to do that.
Okay. I like it. That's a good call. Like I wasn't thinking there. So this is like, I don't know that I would have gotten to him, but he absolutely, I think, deserves to be where you picked him here. Can we play? There's 2 games I want to play with you before the end of this draft. The first one is, who is Ohio State's best cornerback?
Pass. No.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what the other team does. They pass.
Yeah. Probably still Denzel Burke, like, because the penalties for Davis and Gnosin at a certain point are just like, come on, man, like you're killing your team with some of this stuff. So Denzel had the really bad game against Oregon and got targeted a time or two against Northwestern, but like hasn't really been burned like the way like he got. Oh, he had a bad penalty against Michigan too on that trick play. So I don't know. They're kind of even and being a little bit underwhelming, I think, this year, but I'd probably give a slight nod to Denzel.
So just yards given up by PFF, which is not 100% correct, but 179 yards against Oregon, 8 targets, it gave up 8 catches, right?
Yeah.
Disastrous. Since then, yards given up by game, 6, 28, 28, 36, 6, 16. So in the last 6 games, he's given up fewer yards than he did against Oregon single-handedly. That was a bad, you get tricked on it. That's why you run a trick play. You trick a guy. They tricked him. But if I'm like, we're getting to the point where there's mostly cornerbacks and offensive linemen left. And if that's the game we're playing, it's like, who do you take? And I guess I would take Denzel Burke, who in the preseason was our number 2 pick.
So this is number 16,
and now feels high at 16. He went from 2 to 19 and now 16 in the 3 drafts.
I had him 16th on my board, although I was just kind of scribbling names down when I got to the back half. So I don't know if I actually believe that, but I think it makes sense. Like I would probably pair Igbinosun with him. So I'll just take Igbinosun at 17th.
Okay.
Because when he's not committing defensive pass interference, I think he's been pretty good.
Right.
But he just does it. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. He just does it too much. Coverage grade, Burke is a little better if you care about such things on PFF. Igbinosun's still been a very good tackler, like good against the run. So I don't know. I think you can like Jordan Hancock is a similar conversation too. He's been. Maybe the answer is Jordan. If you include Jordan Hancock in the conversation, maybe it's him. He is the best guy in the cornerback room, but he doesn't play outside.
No. Well, but I counted him, and he's not on the field as much. So that's part of it too. Yeah. I was open to Jordan Hancock being the answer there. Okay.
Igbinosun's played 582 snaps. Burke's played 547, and Hancock's played 482.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to play another game?
Sure.
This is the second game. Who is Ohio State's second best healthy offensive lineman?
I think it's got to be Josh Fryer.
by default.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
I
not-
guess you could say like Josh Fryer or Carson Hinsman when he plays guard, maybe.
Yeah,
But I think
mean,
I think it's Fryer. I think it's Fryer.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I was ready to think that this was maybe Carson Hinsman, but then like interior offensive line against Michigan was like a huge deal. So I think maybe before Michigan, I would have said Hinsman, but I'll take Fryer here at 18, based 18 on your advice.
Fryer. Okay.
Fryer was 19th in the preseason and 21st in the middle of the season, and now he's 18th. So he's where he's always been.
Got to update the ticker.
So, I mean, Ryan Day even said that, right? I mean, the idea that Ryan Day thought that the issues on the offensive line and interior offensive line came to a head a little bit against Michigan means to me that they thought they were kind of getting away with it for a while there, and then they stopped getting away with it, which makes me very, very curious for what will happen in the next game.
So, I can't find the ticker to update it on the bottom.
That's okay.
Okay. So
that's okay.
So we're 18th on Fryer.
In your hearts.
That's right.
Updated in your hearts, everybody.
That's right. 19th to me, I'll take Jordan Hancock then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jordan I think Hancock, who I loved in the preseason and was 4th and has been okay, but has not been.
I think we're probably low here.
Do you?
Just based on some guys we have. Yeah. Like I think actually maybe we should have him ahead of Burke and Igbinosun.
Really?
Yeah.
I like the Reese pick though. It's like he basically shares a spot with Reese. And it's like, who do you feel better when they're in the game? Is it Reese or Hancock? I mean, I don't know that there's
tremendous difference. Yeah, the only time like I get nervous when they put Lorenzo Styles in the game at nickel, but not not Jordan Hancock.
Yeah,
we're not going to draft Lorenzo Styles.
Okay.
And Hancock's been good like against the run. I think when they ask him to mix it up in there, so I think I don't think he's taken like the jump that I thought he might take, because I honestly thought with his versatility that he might be able to start pushing for like first round draft pick consideration. And I don't think he's done that, but I don't think he's like any worse than he was last year. I think he's kind of just been the same, which is still a good player.
Okay. All right. So I'll take Carson Hinsman now at number 20, a little bit based on they needed somebody to step up, and you're trying and have been pretty okay at times and did not have a good Michigan game. But maybe there's a chance for you to play a little bit better if you're not going up against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant every single snap, even though Tennessee's good.
Yeah.
So he was not on the board in either of the first 2 drafts.
He was not. So we had Ty Hamilton at 21 the last time we did this.
Yes.
But I actually think Caden McDonald's played better than him.
Okay.
So I'm going to take Caden McDonald at 21.
Okay. I'll buy it.
I think he needs to play more.
I'll buy that too.
And by the way, they didn't rotate the defensive line at all against Michigan.
Oh, really? Okay. Not great. All right. Can I ask you a question to end the show?
You sure can.
What happened to the Ohio State tight end room? What happened from
Kevin Wilson's recruiting?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, God, why can I not think of it?
Jeremy Ruckert and Luke Farrell.
Luke Farrell. God, I couldn't think of his last name. From Jeremy Ruckert and Luke Farrell to this. And again, it's not about blaming the guys in it necessarily. It's just that, like, tight end is kind of a non-factor for Ohio State, and that is not how it's always been. And
I think Kasmerik's been a pretty good blocker when he's been in there.
Okay, so he got hurt. Maybe that,
but he missed half the year.
Yeah. Okay. Like, I don't know. I'm waiting for the Jelani Thurman experience. So, who do you want me to take as a tight end? Do you want me to take Kasmerik or G. Scott as the last spot? G. Scott was 22 last time.
If you're taking a tight end, I would take Kasmerik. I think you could also take Jermaine Matthews, if you wanted to.
Because he's been playing more.
Because he's been playing more, or you could take Ty Hamilton.
Yeah, I'll take Kaczmarek. Owen Kaczmarek. For some reason, for 3 months, I thought his name was Owen. Well, Kaczmarek as the last spot, new to the board. But it's not like, okay, I mean, it's good to... There are times when Ohio State likes to get in 12 personnel and have 2 blocking tight ends in there that you believe in. And there's times when they like to rip throws down the middle of the field to tight ends. And like, I don't think they have the top end talent or the depth there right now for where they have been at times. And it's just like another thing of like, as good as this team is, they have a couple places, obviously, which is normal. Not everybody is perfect in every single position group room, but like, be nice if they got back to having a real game changer at tight end.
I can't remember, like, so now I need to refresh my memory. So in 2020, they still had Farrell and Ruckert. 2021 still had a Ruckert, and like Cade Stover was the number 2 tight end, but played 500 fewer snaps than Jeremy Ruckert did.
Yeah.
2022 was a whole lot of Stover, a little bit of Mitch Rossi. 2023
they love Mitch Rossi. They acted like Mitch Rossi was a All-American when he
2023 was a lot of Stover again, and G. Scott playing like half the snaps that Stover did. So it was like Farrell and Rucker were really good. Like they were pretty good before then too, with like obviously like Hireman, and I always forget the other guy's name who also played in the NFL.
Nick Vanette.
Nick Vanette, thank you.
I like that we're picking each other up with I can't remember a tight end's name today on Kings of Columbus.
And then it was like I just never feel like maybe they had much of a plan there. Like I don't know. I guess let's move Cade Stover to tight end. And like Cade Stover was a pretty good tight end, a really good receiving tight end, and at times a decent enough blocker. But I've never felt like that's a position that Ohio State prioritizes a whole lot in recruiting. It does seem like Keenan Bailey's doing a little bit better job of that. Maybe
now. Maybe with Nate Roberts and stuff, right? Maybe now.
Yeah. So we'll see. But it is a position that fell by the wayside for sure. When for a couple of years, your best tight ends were the guy you move from receiver and the guy you move from linebacker.
Yeah. But I also think, I mean, if we were going to play the game of like which player from 2023 was replaced the least on this team, like just off the top of my head, I think you could argue Cade Stover.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Because like they replaced Marvin Harrison Jr. with Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, right.
And they replaced Cade Stover, who was a 4th round draft pick, right, with a MAC tight end who, not his fault, got hurt for half the year, and 2 other guys who are not super dynamic. And Cade Stover, my God, Cade Stover at times was like a go-to guy in important downs, throwing the ball. So
yeah.
Maybe they'll be getting back to that, but I think there maybe are some times when they've missed that a little bit. I mean, I can remember, I don't know that we debated it, but it's like a year ago in the Big Ten, it was like all Big Ten tight end, Cade Stover or Colston Loveland, right?
Yeah, from passing production, it was like
a toss up.
Yeah,
and now it's like think about what Colston Loveland is, and think about what Ohio State's tight ends are. I'm like that's where we are.
And Cade Stover was a 4th round pick, right? He's like
4th round pick.
Yeah.
All right. Running it down real quick. Number 1, Caleb Downs. 2, Jeremiah Smith. 3, Cody Simon. 4, Emeka Ibuka. 5, Lathan Ransom. 6, Jack Sawyer. 7, Will Howard. 8, Sonny Styles. 9, Travion Henderson. 10, Donovan Jackson. 11, Carnell Tate. 12, JT Tuimoloau. 11, Tyleik Williams. 12, Quinshon Judkins. No, what did I say? 13, Tyleik. 14, Quinshon Judkins. 15, Arvell Reese. 16, Denzel Burke. 17, Davison Egbignosin. 18, Josh Fryer. 19, Jordan Hancock. 20, Carson Hinsman. 21, Cade McDonald. 22, Will Kaczmarek. Your main thing is maybe we were a little low on Hancock.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Does that feel like a national championship team to you when we run through? I let me say this before I ask you this. Let me do it one more time for the show, just for old time's sake. Ask a question and interrupt you before you can answer. There are not as many game-breaking, holy moly, that guy is a monster guys on this list as I would expect of a team that would win a national title. And maybe that's just in comparison to if we were doing this, who is the 7th best team on the 2014 Ohio State National Championship team? I feel like maybe would be more dynamic than like Will Howard is 7th here. And we're like, well, as long as he doesn't throw a back-breaking pick, they'll be okay. Do you agree or not agree? Like elite, top-end, game-changing talent.
Caleb Downs definitely is. I think Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka are. And then I think like the next step down from that is not you're terrible, but I think then you go to the next step down, which is like
it's very good. Not all-American level. Not all-American level. Like good, like all Big Ten level, but not one of the best players in the sport. And I think maybe in the preseason, people thought there were 8 or 12 guys on this team who would be at that game-breaking elite all-American level, and it's more like 4.
Yeah, but I also think that I don't know that there are a lot of teams that have 8 to 12 like all conference level players either. Like no, I think 2 things can be true is that the top end talent maybe not as many guys rose to that level as we thought we're going to, but the floor of talent that Ohio State's going to put out there is still, I think, much higher than a lot of other teams.
Right. No, I agree with that. And then the question is like, is that enough? Like, is that?
I definitely think it could be. Yeah.
Like as a high floor, but you're gonna, and the thing of it is, and again, this will be a fascinating, I think, like deconstruction when this whole thing is over. I'll say it for the 100th time that this team brought back so many guys who could have gone to the NFL to be led by a freshman receiver and a sophomore transfer safety as your 2 best players remains like super interesting to me.
Yeah. It is interesting, but I think to answer your initial question, like I definitely think this is a roster that can win a national championship if the offensive line is just not the biggest liability we've ever seen, and the coaching staff can come up with a better plan than they had against Michigan.
Yeah. Now I'm making myself do this. I'm like looking at the 2014 roster and trying to think like how many guys would fit sort of some of these descriptions of what we're talking about. I'm going to give you my list of guys that, just running through this super quick, I would maybe consider like elite game-breaking guys from 2014. Taylor Decker.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to say for a left tackle, but excellent.
I think so. Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Michael Thomas.
I do not think we would have said that about Michael Thomas at the time. Devin Smith. I don't know that we would have said that about Devin Smith at the time.
Joey Bosa.
Yeah, of course.
Darren Lee.
Yep.
Von Bell.
Yep.
Is there anybody else I'm missing? Like, I don't know that we would have said it. No offense about the great Tyvis Powell, Duran Grant, Josh Perry. Raekwon McMillan was really good, but he was a true freshman, right? And then so that's like 5 instead of 3, but it's not 14. So I'll let you.
Yeah, like looking back, like what those guys became in the NFL, you might convince yourself that there was like 7 or 8. But again, like the current feelings about this group, which like I get where they are based off what happened the last time they played. I don't know that they're definitely going to be reflected in like NFL draft pedigree and then pro production.
Yeah,
I think the latter two though there might outperform the current feelings.
Can I ask you one more?
Yeah.
You're trying to win a national championship starting from right now. If you could add JT Barrett or Cardale Jones instead of Will Howard, what would you do? Of those 3 guys, who would you rather have as your starting quarterback?
Cardale.
Okay. Who'd you have second, Will Howard or JT Barrett?
Probably, I think Will's a more consistent passer than JT. Will.
Okay. All right. We can debate that amongst yourselves out there in Kings of Columbus land. You can have that debate with your friends. I'm not sure where I am, but as much as it's like, I think it would be good for this offense for Will Howard to run more. It's like if you had JT Barrett, you'd be like, I'll run that guy 12 times a game. And like it feels like there's a little bit of part of them that kind of wants to do that and they haven't. So I would be curious. And then it's like, and now we're back to the deep ball discussion. So,
yeah.
Okay. That's it. That's our hour-long show. It took an hour and 40 minutes. I can show you the rundown where it said this show is going to be an hour. and it went an hour 40. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski. As always, come find us on Kings of the North, where there's only 12 teams to talk about in the playoff, and Ohio State's one of them. So we're talking a lot of Ohio State. We will have a deep dive here on Kings of Columbus next week. On Ohio State, Tennessee, we will have big game breakdowns on Kings of the North on all 4 first-round games. Not quite as much on Texas Clemson, but certainly deep dives on SMU, Penn State, Notre Dame, Indiana, and Ohio State, Tennessee. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.